Michael Travers had always carried himself with quiet dignity. From the moment he joined the Army at the age of 18, he knew his life would be shaped by discipline, sacrifice, and honor. Over 12 years of service, he had faced dangers that most civilians could hardly imagine. He fought in 2 wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, places where every day brought uncertainty, and every decision could mean the difference between life and death. He had earned medals for his bravery, including the Silver Star, one of the nation's highest awards for valor, and the Purple Heart, given to those wounded in combat. After leaving the military, Michael returned home to a small town nestled in the heart of America. It was a place where everyone knew each other, where the flag flew proudly over the courthouse, and where stories of veterans were spoken with respect and admiration. Michael settled into a quieter life, working at the local Veterans Center and helping other soldiers transition back to civilian life. He remained humble about his service but never hid the medals pinned to his uniform on special occasions. One warm spring afternoon, Michael received an unexpected invitation. The local courthouse was hosting a community event aimed at raising awareness about justice and civic responsibility. The organizers wanted a veteran to speak about the meaning of service and sacrifice, a living example of what commitment to country and justice really looked like. Michael was the perfect choice. He accepted the invitation with a mixture of pride and nervousness. Public speaking was not his forte, but he understood the importance of the message. On the day of the event, Michael dressed carefully. He chose his military dress uniform, a sharp dark blue suit adorned with his ribbons and medals. Each medal told a story: a battle fought, a comrade saved, a wound healed. For Michael, wearing them was not about showing off, but about honoring those who could no longer wear them, friends who never returned home. As he stood before the modest crowd gathered in the courthouse's main hall, he felt the weight of history and responsibility resting on his shoulders. The audience was a mix of townspeople, lawyers, law enforcement officers, and local officials. They listened intently as Michael spoke from the heart. He told stories of courage, of fear, and of the strong bonds forged between soldiers in the most difficult moments. He spoke about justice, not just legal justice, but the justice of fairness, respect, and humanity. His words moved many. When he finished, the room burst into applause, some standing to honor the veteran who had risked everything for his country. After the speech, Michael mingled with attendees, answering questions and shaking hands. It was a day of pride, a day he hoped would remind people of the sacrifices made by service members. But behind the scenes, not everyone shared the warm feelings. Judge Raymond Keller, a recently appointed county judge known for his strict and sometimes cold demeanor, watched the event unfold with a furrowed brow. Keller had built his career on order, discipline, and maintaining the dignity of the courtroom. He believed strongly in rules, especially when it came to appearances in his court. To him, the courtroom was a place where personal expressions had to be kept in check to ensure neutrality and respect for the law. When Michael entered the judge's chambers for a brief post-event discussion, Keller wasted no time addressing what he saw as a problem. "Sergeant Travers," he said bluntly, "I must insist you remove those medals before entering the courtroom. Wearing military decorations here is against the court's dress code, and it disrupts the impartial atmosphere we must maintain." Michael was stunned. The words felt like a blow. The medals were more than pieces of metal to him. They were symbols of sacrifice and honor. To be told to take them off felt like a personal affront. "Your Honor," Michael replied respectfully, "these medals represent the service I gave to my country. They are part of who I am." The judge was unmoved. "The rules are clear. No decorations or symbols that can be seen as political, personal, or distracting are allowed in my courtroom. It is about fairness to all who come before the court." Michael's heart sank. He had never thought about his medals being a distraction or a violation. He had always believed they commanded respect, especially in a place dedicated to justice. Yet, here was a man in power demanding their removal, not out of respect, but because of an interpretation of rules that seemed cold and impersonal. The veteran considered arguing further, but he knew better than to challenge a judge's order directly, especially in that moment. He carefully unpinned the medals from his uniform and placed them on a nearby table. As he walked into the courtroom without the symbols of his service, he felt as if a part of his identity had been stripped away. Word of the incident did not stay quiet for long. A court clerk, witnessing the tense exchange, quietly mentioned it to a friend who worked at a local newspaper. From there, the story began to spread like wildfire. Michael initially tried to keep a low profile. He didn't want to become a cause célèbre or stir controversy. But as the public learned about the judge's order to remove his medals, something unexpected happened. People began to rally around Michael. Veterans groups sent letters of support. Social media erupted with posts condemning the judge's decision. The story caught the attention of regional news outlets, then national ones. Michael was invited to appear on television. At first he hesitated. Speaking publicly about the incident meant reopening wounds and facing scrutiny. But with encouragement from friends and fellow veterans, he agreed. In the interview, he spoke calmly but passionately about why wearing his medals was not about pride, but about remembrance, honoring comrades who had made the ultimate sacrifice and representing the values he fought to protect. The reaction was overwhelming. Many viewers expressed outrage that a judge would force a veteran to remove symbols of his sacrifice. Others began to question Judge Keller's motivations and judgment. Was this truly about courtroom decorum, or was it something more? In response, Judge Keller issued a formal order to courthouse staff, banning non-legal decorations, such as military medals, from all courtroom proceedings. His memo emphasized maintaining neutrality, but did not explain why veterans' medals were singled out. Legal experts began to weigh in, some supporting the judge's authority to enforce rules, others warning of potential discrimination and infringement on free expression. Amid this growing controversy, investigative journalists dug deeper into Judge Keller's background. They uncovered disciplinary complaints filed against him over the years, many accusing him of harsh treatment of defendants and courtroom staff. A pattern of behavior began to emerge. Keller was known for being rigid, unforgiving, and sometimes intimidating. Meanwhile, Michael's peaceful desire to simply wear his medals had unwittingly turned into a public battle that questioned authority, fairness, and respect for those who serve. As the media spotlight grew brighter, Michael found himself at the center of a storm he never sought. He received messages of support from veterans across the country, but also faced criticism from those who believed he should simply obey the court's rules without complaint. Through it all, Michael remained composed. His focus was on the bigger picture. Not just his own medals, but the principle that those who have served should be honored, not silenced. The first part of this story ends with Michael standing at a crossroads. Should he accept the judge's demand and remain silent, or should he fight back and risk everything for what he believes is right? The answer would shape the next chapters of his life and, unexpectedly, change the course of Judge Keller's career as well. After the incident at the courthouse, when Judge Keller ordered Michael Travers to remove his medals, the story did not stay confined to a quiet town courtroom for long. What seemed like a small moment, a demand for a veteran to take off his symbols of service, soon became a spark that ignited a much larger fire of public outrage and debate. The first to bring attention to what had happened was an anonymous court clerk. She had been quietly observing the tense exchange between the judge and the veteran. Seeing how Michael, a man who had sacrificed so much for his country, was treated harshly unsettled her. Unable to ignore it, she posted a message on a local social media page dedicated to veterans and community news. The post simply said that a judge had forced a decorated war veteran to remove his medals during a courthouse event. She didn't add much else but ended with a question. Is this really how we treat our heroes? That post caught fire quickly. Within hours, people started commenting, sharing, and talking about it. Local veterans organizations took up the cause, demanding an explanation, and calling for respect for those who had served. Soon, local news stations picked up the story, interviewing people in the town who were both surprised and upset by the judge's order. Michael initially tried to keep out of the spotlight. He did not want to become a public figure or a symbol of controversy. His life after service had been peaceful, centered on helping other veterans heal and find jobs. But friends and fellow veterans urged him to speak out, explaining that his silence might allow the injustice to continue unnoticed. They told him that his story could inspire others to stand up for what is right, not just for veterans, but for anyone who feels unfairly treated. After much thought, Michael agreed to a televised interview with a local news reporter. Sitting in his modest living room wearing a simple shirt rather than his dress uniform, he spoke softly but firmly. He said, "I wear my medals not to boast or seek attention, but to remember the friends I lost and the sacrifices we all made. These medals tell a story of courage and pain, and they remind me why justice must be fair and compassionate." His words struck a chord. Viewers across the region expressed support, sharing their own stories of military family members or their respect for veterans. The interview was shared widely on social media, and soon national news outlets began reaching out to Michael for comment. As the story grew, Judge Keller found himself increasingly isolated. Instead of calming the situation, he took a harder stance. He issued a formal directive to all courthouse employees, banning any non-legal decorations from courtroom events. In his order, he emphasized the need for the court to remain impartial and neutral, suggesting that personal symbols, including military medals, could create bias or distractions. This move only fueled the fire. Many people saw the judge's order as an unnecessary attack on veterans and their rights. Legal experts debated the issue, with some saying judges do have the authority to set courtroom rules to maintain decorum, while others warned that the ban might violate constitutional protections of free expression and unfairly target veterans. The public outcry was powerful. Veterans groups organized rallies outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Honor our heroes," and "Medals are not a distraction." Local politicians, sensing the community's strong feelings, began to speak out. A few council members called for an official review of the judge's conduct. Meanwhile, investigative reporters started digging into Judge Keller's past. They uncovered a series of complaints from lawyers and court staff, alleging that Keller was known for being harsh, sometimes unfair, and difficult to work with. Some former employees spoke on condition of anonymity, describing a tense and often hostile work environment. The judge's reputation, once solid among legal circles, began to crumble. The pressure on Keller grew as more details came to light. He had built his career by strictly enforcing rules and expectations, often at the expense of empathy or understanding. Some critics suggested his actions against Michael were part of a pattern, using his authority to control situations without regard for fairness or the feelings of those involved. At the same time, Michael's supporters rallied to help him. A nonprofit legal group specializing in civil rights cases offered to represent him for free. They saw this as an important case, not only about the rights of veterans, but about protecting free expression and preventing abuse of power by judges. As Michael prepared to take legal action, he received an outpouring of support from veterans across the country. Messages arrived from people he had never met, thanking him for standing up and promising to follow his case closely. Some even sent donations to help with his legal costs, wanting to ensure he had the resources to fight. The veteran also found himself contacted by media outlets eager for interviews, profiles, and opinion pieces. Though he preferred a quiet life, he recognized the importance of using this moment to highlight broader issues about respect, justice, and the treatment of veterans in civilian life. Despite the growing attention, the experience was not easy. Michael faced criticism from some who accused him of seeking attention or being disrespectful to the court. He was warned that fighting a judge could backfire and harm his reputation. But Michael remained steady. He remembered the friends who had died in combat, the sacrifices made by millions of soldiers before him, and the values he had fought to defend. Those memories gave him strength. Meanwhile, Judge Keller's attempts to defend his actions became increasingly strained. His decision to accuse Michael of stolen valor, suggesting that some of his medals were not rightfully earned, was a desperate move that backfired spectacularly. Pentagon records quickly confirmed the authenticity of Michael's awards, and the public turned sharply against Keller for making false accusations. The story evolved from a simple dispute about courtroom rules into a larger debate about honor, truth, and accountability. Keller's credibility took a heavy blow, while Michael's reputation grew stronger. At the heart of the conflict was a deeper question. How should society treat those who have served and sacrificed? Was it fair to expect veterans to hide their symbols of service in places like courthouses, or should those symbols be recognized as part of their identity and experience? The public largely sided with Michael, seeing his medals as a reminder of bravery and sacrifice, not as distractions or political statements. The second part of this story shows how a single moment, a judge's demand, can ripple outward, exposing larger issues and creating waves of change. It reveals the power of community support, the importance of standing up for one's rights, and the risks and rewards of challenging authority. For Michael, it was a turning point. What began as a personal slight grew into a public battle that would test his courage in new ways and push him onto a path that none of the people involved could have predicted. As the controversy surrounding Judge Keller's demand that Michael Travers remove his military medals grew louder, the situation began to move beyond the small town and local courthouse. What had started as a private conflict was now evolving into a full-scale legal battle, one that would not only challenge Michael's rights, but also threaten to expose serious problems with the judge himself. Michael had never intended to become a public figure or a symbol of resistance. He was a man who had already given much in service to his country and wanted only to live a quiet life helping other veterans. But when his medals were stripped away in front of the courthouse, it struck a deep nerve. For Michael, this was not just about personal pride. It was about justice, respect, and standing up for what was right. Realizing the magnitude of the issue, a nonprofit civil rights organization stepped forward to represent Michael. Their lawyers were experienced in fighting cases involving freedom of expression and discrimination. They saw Michael's case as an important test of whether courts could restrict a person's right to display symbols of military service and whether judges could misuse their power to silence dissent. With legal help secured, Michael prepared to file a formal civil rights complaint against the county courthouse and Judge Keller. The complaint argued that Keller's order violated Michael's constitutional rights to free speech and expression. Wearing military medals was a form of personal expression, deeply tied to Michael's identity as a veteran, and forcing him to remove them was discriminatory. As the legal process began, tensions at the courthouse grew higher. Keller's courtroom became a battleground, with the judge openly criticizing Michael's supporters and the media coverage. Some court staff reported that Keller's behavior became more hostile and unpredictable. He was no longer just a strict judge enforcing rules. Many began to see him as someone using his power to punish and intimidate. At the same time, Michael and his legal team worked to uncover more about Keller's history. They found troubling evidence. Former courthouse employees came forward, sharing stories of Keller's harsh treatment, favoritism, and bias. They described a man who held grudges, made decisions based on personal feelings, and sometimes acted outside the bounds of judicial fairness. The more these stories emerged, the more the public began to see a picture of a judge whose authority might have been abused for years. News outlets ran stories detailing the complaints and casting doubt on Keller's ability to serve fairly. Pressure mounted on the state's Judicial Oversight Board to investigate Keller's conduct. Meanwhile, Michael faced his own personal challenges. Though supported by many, he also endured stress and uncertainty. The legal battle was slow and draining. His privacy was invaded by reporters, and he had to relive painful memories of his military service in court testimony. Friends and family worried about how the fight might affect him emotionally and physically. The courtroom drama intensified when Keller, in a desperate attempt to defend himself, accused Michael of stolen valor. He claimed that Michael had lied about the medals he had earned, implying that his military honors were fake. This accusation shocked everyone, especially Michael and his supporters. Such a serious charge was meant to destroy Michael's reputation, but Michael's legal team quickly fought back, producing official Pentagon records that confirmed the authenticity of every medal Michael had received. The records were clear and undisputed. The judge's accusations collapsed under the weight of evidence, making him look reckless and desperate. Public opinion turned sharply against Keller. Many saw his accusation as a personal attack meant to silence Michael and distract from his own failures. As the legal battle continued, Michael took the stand during hearings. He spoke calmly about his service, the meaning of his medals, and the hurt caused by the judge's order. His testimony was powerful and heartfelt, touching the hearts of many who followed the case. People could see the genuine man behind the medals, someone who had sacrificed, suffered, and now stood for justice. At the same time, the Judicial Review Board conducted a thorough investigation into Keller's behavior. Interviews with court employees, lawyers, and witnesses painted a disturbing picture of a judge who had repeatedly acted in ways that undermined fairness and trust in the legal system. They found evidence of verbal abuse, intimidation, and misuse of power. Faced with mounting evidence and public condemnation, Keller's position became untenable. His supporters in the legal community quietly withdrew their backing. Facing potential suspension, lawsuits, and damage to his reputation, Keller eventually resigned from his judgeship in an abrupt and unexpected move. In his resignation statement, he blamed what he called cancel culture for forcing him out, refusing to take responsibility for his actions. The end of Keller's career marked a major turning point in the story. It was a dramatic fall from grace for a man who had once been respected in legal circles. Meanwhile, Michael emerged not just as a victim, but as a symbol of courage and resilience. His fight was about more than medals. It was about holding those in power accountable and protecting the rights of those who serve. As the courtroom doors closed behind Keller, new conversations began. The case had exposed flaws in the system and highlighted the importance of fairness, respect, and accountability. Michael's victory became a beacon for others who faced injustice, especially veterans who struggled to find their place in civilian life. Though exhausted by the ordeal, Michael remained focused on the future. He continued to work with veterans, organizations, advocating for policies that would prevent others from suffering similar discrimination. His legal battle had changed him, deepening his commitment to justice and inspiring him to help others stand strong. The third part of this story reveals how the fight for one man's rights can uncover hidden abuses of power and shake a system to its core. It shows the risks involved in challenging authority, but also the strength that comes from standing up for truth. For Michael Travers, the battle was far from over, but he had taken a decisive step toward justice, and justice had begun to fight back. After Judge Keller's resignation, the town was left stunned. For many, it was hard to imagine a judge, a symbol of law and order, being forced out because of his own misconduct. But for Michael Travers and his supporters, it felt like justice had finally been served. Yet while Keller's fall was dramatic, it marked just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with reflection, healing, and a powerful push for change. Michael's life had been turned upside down by the fight. The legal battle, the media attention, and the emotional strain had taken a toll. Yet through it all, he never lost sight of his purpose. He had entered the conflict simply wanting to wear his medals with pride, but now he was determined to use his experience to make a difference for others. In the weeks following Keller's resignation, Michael became a prominent voice in the veterans community. Organizations invited him to speak at events where he shared not just his story, but also his vision for how veterans should be treated with respect and dignity. His message was simple, but powerful. Honor those who serve, listen to their experiences, and ensure they receive fair treatment in all parts of society. One of the most important things Michael emphasized was the need for better education about veterans' issues. He explained how many civilians had little understanding of what soldiers endure in combat, the physical dangers, the emotional scars, and the challenges of returning to civilian life. For Michael, his medals were not just decorations. They were symbols of resilience and sacrifice that everyone should respect. Alongside his advocacy work, Michael began collaborating with local government officials and veterans groups to create programs that would support veterans in practical ways. These included job training workshops, mental health counseling, and legal aid services tailored specifically to veterans' needs. His efforts helped bridge the gap between the military world and civilian society, fostering empathy and understanding. But Michael's journey was not without its challenges. Not everyone welcomed his activism. Some critics accused him of politicizing his military service or stirring up unnecessary conflict. They argued that the court's rules about courtroom decorum should be respected, and that Michael had overreacted. Others were skeptical about changing long-standing practices or laws. Despite these obstacles, Michael remained steadfast. He believed that change often began with discomfort and difficult conversations. By speaking openly about his experiences, he encouraged others to reflect on their own attitudes toward veterans and justice. Slowly but surely, his message began to resonate beyond his hometown. Meanwhile, the county courthouse underwent a period of review and reform. The scandal involving Judge Keller had revealed weaknesses in oversight and accountability. New policies were introduced to ensure judges and court staff received training on fairness, ethics, and sensitivity to the needs of diverse populations, including veterans. Michael played a key role in these reforms. He participated in advisory committees and helped design training materials that highlighted the importance of respecting veterans' service and symbols like medals. His input was valued because it came from real-life experience rather than theory. The reforms also included clearer guidelines about courtroom dress codes. Instead of blanket bans on decorations, the new rules allowed judges more discretion to consider context. For example, veterans attending court events could wear their medals with respect and dignity, as long as it did not interfere with court proceedings. This change was a victory for Michael and many others who had long felt that their service was misunderstood or undervalued. Beyond the courthouse, Michael's story inspired broader conversations nationwide. Media outlets featured articles and documentaries about the challenges veterans face, from reintegration struggles to encounters with the justice system. His case was cited in discussions about constitutional rights, respect for military service, and the need to hold public officials accountable. As his profile grew, Michael remained humble. He never sought fame or personal gain. Instead, he focused on building connections and creating positive change. His work reached schools, community centers, and veterans' hospitals. He became a mentor to young veterans who were struggling, reminding them that their service mattered and that they were not alone. Michael also found healing in sharing his story. Talking about the battle with Judge Keller and its aftermath helped him process painful memories and find peace. He discovered strength in community and purpose in advocacy. His medals, once a source of conflict, had become symbols of hope and progress. Despite all the attention, Michael never forgot the friends he had lost in war. He honored their memory by dedicating his efforts to improving the lives of those who came after them. His work was a tribute to their sacrifice and a promise that their stories would not be forgotten. The fourth part of this story shows how one person's struggle can lead to lasting change. It highlights the power of courage, resilience, and community. Michael Travers had faced a judge's harsh demands and the public scrutiny, but he emerged stronger, using his voice to fight for justice and respect, not just for himself, but for all veterans. Through his journey, the story teaches an important lesson. Real change is possible when people stand up, speak out, and work together. Michael's fight was not just about medals or courtrooms. It was about honor, dignity, and the belief that everyone deserves to be treated fairly. After everything that had happened, the confrontation in the courtroom, the media storm, the judge's resignation, and the changes in the courthouse, Michael Travers found himself in a new chapter of his life. The battle had taken so much from him, his peace, his privacy, and a lot of his energy, but it had also given him something unexpected. A powerful voice. Michael, once just a quiet veteran trying to live a simple life, had become a symbol of courage and justice. But the journey was far from over. Even after the judge's fall and the legal victory, Michael knew the fight for veterans' rights was only beginning. The courtroom drama had shed light on a much larger issue: how society treats veterans, and how often their sacrifices are misunderstood or overlooked. Michael wanted to make sure the conversation continued, that people didn't forget the lessons learned from his experience. He began traveling to cities and towns across the country, invited by veterans organizations, schools, and community groups. At each place, Michael shared his story, not just about the courtroom battle but about what it meant to serve in the military, the challenges of returning home, and the importance of respect and dignity for all veterans. His speeches were simple, but heartfelt, filled with honesty and humility. Michael talked about the medals he wore, explaining they weren't just shiny decorations. Each medal represented a chapter in his life, a story of bravery, pain, and brotherhood. He spoke about the friends he lost, the battles he fought, and the strength it took to keep going. His words moved many listeners, some of whom had never met a veteran before or understood what service really meant. With every speech, Michael saw a change in the way people thought about veterans. He noticed young students paying closer attention, adults asking thoughtful questions, and communities starting to think about how they could support their local heroes better. It gave him hope that his fight was making a difference. But Michael's work went beyond speaking engagements. He became deeply involved in advocacy, working with lawmakers to pass new policies aimed at protecting veterans' rights. One important focus was ensuring veterans could wear their medals and display their service proudly, whether in courtrooms, schools, or public events. Michael argued that these symbols were part of a veteran's identity and should never be hidden or dismissed. He also pushed for better mental health care for veterans, knowing firsthand how many struggled silently with trauma after leaving the battlefield. Michael collaborated with doctors, therapists, and veterans groups to create programs that offered counseling, support groups, and resources tailored to veterans' unique needs. His efforts helped bring more attention and funding to these issues. He testified at congressional hearings, met with government officials, and worked closely with nonprofit organizations to expand services. His personal story gave him credibility, and his passion inspired others to join the cause. Through all this, Michael stayed connected to his roots. He continued volunteering at the local Veterans Center, helping fellow soldiers find jobs, housing, and hope. He believed that no veteran should ever feel forgotten or alone. The community that had supported him throughout his fight became his anchor. Of course, the journey wasn't without struggles. Advocating for change in a large system was slow and often frustrating. Michael faced resistance from people who didn't understand or didn't want to prioritize veterans' issues. There were times when progress seemed impossible, and setbacks felt crushing. But Michael learned to be patient and persistent. He understood that meaningful change rarely happens overnight. Each small victory, whether a new law passed, a program started, or a veteran helped, was a step forward. He reminded himself that the sacrifices of so many deserved nothing less than his full effort. Along the way, Michael's story continued to attract attention from the media. He was featured in newspapers, magazines, and documentaries. His case became a teaching moment in law schools, ethics classes, and military training programs. His fight against Judge Keller was studied as an example of standing up against injustice and the power of accountability. Despite the spotlight, Michael remained humble. He rarely spoke about his personal feelings or struggles in public, choosing, instead, to focus on the issues at hand. But those close to him knew that the journey had been hard. The pain of reliving difficult memories and the stress of public scrutiny took a toll on his health and family life. Still, Michael found strength in his faith, his family, and his fellow veterans. He credited their support with helping him keep going. He often said that no one fights alone, and that the bonds formed in the military stayed strong long after service ended. As years passed, Michael's legacy grew. The changes he helped bring about made courts more respectful of veterans and more aware of their needs. Veterans' voices were heard louder in public policy debates, and communities became more welcoming and supportive. Michael also inspired a new generation of veterans to speak out and advocate for themselves. They saw in him a model of courage, resilience, and dignity. Some of them reached out to Michael for advice and mentorship, continuing the work he had started. One of the most meaningful moments came when Michael was invited to return to the courthouse, not as a defendant or a victim, but as an honored guest. The new judge, chosen after Keller's departure, had invited Michael to speak at a ceremony recognizing the importance of fairness and respect in the justice system. Michael wore his medals proudly that day, but this time there was no conflict, only respect and appreciation. Looking back, Michael saw how far he had come. The fight that had threatened to destroy his peace had transformed into a mission that saved his spirit. What began as a personal challenge became a movement for justice, respect, and healing. Michael often reflected on the judge's order to remove his medals, the moment that changed everything. It was a painful experience, but it opened a door to change that might never have happened otherwise. Michael's journey was proof that even when life tries to knock you down, standing tall and speaking truth can light a path for others. His medals, once a source of conflict, had become symbols of hope, courage, and the power of standing up for what is right. Michael Travers had turned a painful moment into a lifetime of purpose, reminding the world that heroes deserve to be honored, not silenced.